I think in some respects, I think they knew what they were doing when they didn't, because in a sense, this is market moving, potentially information for their stock. And so they tend not to want to clear those things in advance. So, I do think that they, generally speaking, are a good actor. I do think that their scientists are working to figure out how to make sure they can continue to keep us protected. And so I wouldn't overread the situation here. I know it confuses the public, but I think the public should recognize we got one source here, and that'll be the scientists of the CDC and the FDA.
Right, because people might think that these vaccines aren't sufficient. If Pfizer comes out of the clear blue and talks about booster shots in this fashion, I want to get your reaction though to what Senator Mitch McConnell said about vaccine hesitancy on Thursday. Let's listen to this.
I'm perplexed by the reluctance of some to get vaccinated. Totally perplexed by it.
Yeah, he apparently does not know what is driving vaccine hesitancy. I think that's fairly astounding. But what do you think is driving it these days? And do you think the Senate Minority Leader is being a bit facetious there?
Well, look, good for him for saying that. I wish he would go the next step and talk to people who are in the eye of the storm in his part of the country in the South and in the Midwest, because they're being told by other people in his party, namely Marjorie Taylor Greene, that the federal government effort, the Biden effort to vaccinate the public is akin to Nazism. And it's not her first brush with comparing stuff to Nazism, but this whole notion that you should be more scared of the government because when the government does something, it's by definition fascism, then you should be scared of a naturally occurring disease is really dangerous rhetoric. And so I would hope that people would just, put a stop to that. If Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't want to get vaccinated, she should not get vaccinated. But what she's doing is essentially what's publicly acceptable anti-vaccine, because it's not so socially acceptable for her to say, I don't agree with vaccines. So what she does is she plants these statements and these doubts. And I would hope that more responsible people, and there are some, Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, has been very clear. He said, if you don't get vaccinated, you're part of the problem. That's a very clear statement.
But isn't that kind of talk from Marjorie Taylor Greene just dangerous? And it feeds into this vaccine hesitancy problem that we're seeing across the country when you are making these kinds of comparisons to brown shirts, and you have Congressman Madison Cawthorn saying that if they come to your house to talk about vaccines, they may come for your guns and your Bibles and so on. How do you get past that noise in the parts of the country where vaccine hesitancy is high and these vaccination rates are low?
You're exactly right, Jim. I mean, you make it a badge of courage to not wear a mask, to not get a vaccine, to believe that someone coming to talk to you about your health in the middle of a crisis is somehow stealing away your God-given liberty. That's not helpful. That's destructive. We know that we have about 30% of adults that haven't gotten vaccinated yet. We know that about a third of them are seriously considering it, and about 2/3 of them are dead set against. And the 2/3 dead set against are Marjorie Taylor Greene's base. And they're getting more and more cemented into this sort of worldview. And it's a dangerous worldview. I mean, God forbid they lived in another country in the world right now where they didn't have access to a vaccine. I mean, these are people who have access to vaccines. If you go anywhere around the world, if you go to Australia right now and just talk to folks down there, they would, I don't want to say they would kill, but they would do virtually anything to be in the fortunate position that people here are, where they have access to free, safe, abundant vaccines. And I think they're in real jeopardy around the world because they don't.
Andy, but you were in the administration. Do you think the Biden White House should have pushed harder against this kind of disinformation from the get-go? Were you too confident that reason would win out and that science and facts would win the day as much as they should? Did they push back hard enough on? Did you and others push back hard enough on this disinformation?
That's a good question. Remember, Jim, when we got to the White House in January 2020, the number of Americans who said they were confident that they would take a vaccine was only 40%. So we got to work on it immediately. And that 40% is now, we're now at 70% for a reason. One of the reasons is simply it's a great vaccine and very effective and has a great record. But we learned that unlike what some were suggesting, that the people who needed to get convinced didn't need to get convinced by a politician in Washington or by a pharmaceutical company. They wanted to hear from local people, local doctors, faith leaders. So we began engaging then immediately with real information. You're right, we do fight against the people on Facebook and people on other platforms who put disinformation out, and now sadly people within the Republican caucus as well. But I would say that we've made enormous progress. There's more to do, and there's no reason why everybody shouldn't be on the side of helping save American lives.
No question about it. Let me ask you about the CDC guidance that schools should return to in-person learning this fall because of the Delta variant. More than half of states are trending up in new cases. Combine that with kids under 12 not being able to get vaccinated yet for COVID. Is this the right call, do you think?
It is. I mean, through a combination of factors. First, that we now know that there are plenty of precautions that can be taken. Secondly, teachers now have the ability to be vaccinated, and that protects them. Third, we know that the risk to children of something serious happening is modest, but also we can protect against it. So there are a set of layered mitigations that the CDC suggests that are going to have to be adopted locally to the local conditions. But what we are saying is that in every case, you can say it is safe to send your kids back to school for in-person learning. We may have to make some adjustments. It may not be exactly as it was before just yet, but that is very good news, and I think will be widely supported.
Let me ask you about what Republican Senator Rand Paul is trying to do. He wants to repeal the mask mandate on commercial flights. I was just flying across the country from California. Everybody's masked up, and the airlines make you do it. Bad idea to drop those mask mandates on commercial flights, do you think?
Look, a bad idea for politicians to get in the middle of this. Because when politicians are getting in the middle of this, we're not hearing from the people who actually know, which is scientists. He should step back, get out of this arena, and let the scientists make their decisions. The CDC actually studies data. He studies polls. He looks at what his supporters, who are quite anti-establishment, quite anti-mask, anti-vaccine, want, and he says popular stuff, and it helps them raise money.
But what about the idea of dropping the masks? Do you think it's a good idea? Should people continue wearing masks on these planes? I mean, this gets to this whole issue about confidence in the vaccines. People will say, well, if you're going to make me wear a mask from here to eternity, why? What's the point of the vaccine? I'm not saying that is the case, but that is what some folks say, as you know. So what do you think?
Yeah.
Time to relax that.
Here's how I look at it. And by the way, I'm not a scientist either, so let's listen to the scientists, and that's what I do. The reason I think it makes sense to wear masks when you travel is you have no idea who you're getting on the plane with and where they're coming from. The planes themselves are pretty good ventilation, but I could be getting on a plane with people from 7 different countries with who knows what variant, and so it makes a lot of sense to just add that extra layer of protection when you're in that kind of environment. When I'm in my own community here in California, and I know that the prevalence here is very, very low, and I've been vaccinated, then I don't wear a mask when I go to restaurants or I go indoors or go to a concert because I feel quite safe. So I think that's why there's the difference. And again, it's not forever. These things are for an intermediate period of time until such time as we defeat this defeat this virus a little bit further.
Absolutely, we're all for that. All right, Andy Slavitt, thanks so much for coming on. Great to talk to you. We appreciate it.